Hi everyone, my name is Sonia Culberson. I'm the assistant principal at Dr. Max Sanders Primary School, and I have been invited to talk to you a little bit about research-based best practices in assessing students with mild to moderate disabilities. I think the most important thing we need to remember is that we need to use many types of assessments to determine students' strengths and areas of need, because the evaluator needs to have a clear picture of what the student levels of performance are, and just to determine if the student is eligible for special education services. With that in mind, let's talk about best practices. As I said before, use a wide array of assessments to determine a student's strengths and expertise. We do have assessments in instruction that are assessments for learning and assessments of learning. Assessments for learning, maybe those informal assessments that inform the teacher about the teaching practices. So the teacher teaches, assess, reflects, adjust, and that's our inquiry cycle. And assessments of learning will tell us if the students meet the standards or meet the learning goals. So we have assessments to measure adequate progress. Again, those could be formal or informal. We have assessments that will tell us about students' present levels and what the students are able to know, to do, and how that relates to their grade level. So let's talk about formal assessments that will tell us that the students' present levels of performance against what it is developmentally appropriate for students of that age, and like I said, at that grade level. So when there is eligibility for special education services, informal assessments will be able to be used to give us instant feedback of what the student, or how the student is learning, and how the student is progressing towards their learning goals. We have norm reference tests that will be a good starting point when working with students with special needs, because they pinpoint strengths and areas of growth that will help the teacher to plan and to design differentiated instruction. Also, we have criterion reference that will measure students' progress in their IEP goals. And let's don't forget about the authentic assessments that will help the students, will help us to make instruction more meaningful and engaging. Considerations, let's talk about considerations when assessing best practices. We'll be considering the safe and ethical collection of the data, like how are we assessing the students? Is my assessment bias? Is there any bias on the assessments that we are administering? Let's talk about culture and language. Is there anything in my assessment that is preventing my students from showing what they are able to do and what they know? That is very important. When we talk about storage, we talk about confidentiality. So let's talk about who I am allowed to share this data with by law. Am I allowed to share it with the whole staff, or am I allowed to share it with my IEP? Shall I keep it to my IEP team? What are those guidelines according to federal and state regulation? If I'm using technology and I am uploading this to any platform, am I allowed to post this in a platform? Do I need parental consent? Do I have parental consent to use this technology? And one other consideration is reporting. So communicating with the IEP team and families, how often, and we'll talk a little more about that in further. So when we talk about assessments, the data collected will be qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative will give us the why. Quantitative will tell us how much. We will use observations for qualitative data and statistical results and the quantitative data. And both will help us have a clear picture and an unbiased, hopefully an unbiased picture of a student's performance. How is this data going to support instruction and behavioral decision makings? Well, we will know what students can and cannot do. This data will let us know, for example, in our reference data will tell us strengths and areas of growth. If we use a criterion reference, it will inform educators about students' performance levels. Like I said, will help us group students by their skills and make instruction more meaningful, and that is best practice. And the authentic assessments are that qualitative piece that will inform instruction and allow for reteaching opportunities. Things that we need to be aware of, and how are we going to monitor, evaluate, or report the results of the assessment throughout. So we need to monitor our assessments. Are our assessments aligned to the proposed goals? We need to evaluate the validity and reliability of our assessment. Reliability relates to the consistency of the assessment, and validity relates to the inferences made from the assessment. So if a test is reliable, then inference we draw from it can be valid. However, valid inferences cannot be made if the test is not reliable. And like I said before, how are we going to report to stakeholders? Are we going to have quarterly meetings? Are we going to have data meetings? We need to be able to communicate in plain English so families are able to understand the results of our assessments. That is also best practice. Here are a few references and a few resources if you want to dig deeper into these topics. And I hope that this was informational, and I'll see you next time.